Hello. Welcome again to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast where we talk about films off the Rotten Tomatoes 200 Best Horror Movies of All Time list. My name is Clay McCormick, and with me as always is Amanda. Amanda, I have a question for you.
Yes, Clay.
On a hot summer night, would you offer your throat to the wolf with the red roses?
No.
I bet you say that to all the boys.
What are we doing?
That's Meatloaf.
Ah.
It's just the first thing that popped into my head. It's very similar to what they say in this movie.
I have
Only
what they say in this movie.
Less sexy.
I wrote it down.
More sexy than what they say in this movie. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
There's poetry.
Yes. We, of course, are talking about The Wolfman from 1941, one of the later of the original Universal monsters. Lon Chaney Jr., very recognizable makeup, but some reason sounds like a miniature schnauzer when he growls at people. It is number 86 on our list. It has a 90% with an 80% audience score. Had you seen this before?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was one. Classic horror movies were ones that even when we were pretty young, we were allowed to watch.
Yeah, same.
At home. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think actually I saw one of my first Universal horror movies, if not the first one I ever saw, was Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman.
Oh,
which
fun.
was recommended by my dad. We went to the video store and he's like, we should watch this.
Aww.
And I loved it.
Yeah.
And I still love it. And I hold that movie very sentimental.
Yeah.
But I always loved Wolfman. I don't know why. I was really into werewolf movies for a while, like in college. I don't know if it's because I was growing a beard for the first time and I felt seen.
You watched Ginger Snaps and you were just like, oh, this is so me.
Yes. But yeah, I've always liked werewolf movies. I was, as we were watching it, I think the thing that stood out to me is that more so than Dracula, more so than Frankenstein, I feel like Wolfman is the one classic Universal monster who has like real, I don't know if pathos is the right word, because there's pathos for Frankenstein, but there's a relatability to the Wolfman that I feel like Dracula and Frankenstein and Creature from the Black Lagoon don't have.
Well, yeah, he still has his humanity.
Yeah, and he's cursed to.
Yes. Yeah, I want to talk all.
Yeah,
about,
we'll get all into that. Wolfman's great. We have
Yes.
Larry with us here
Larry.
in action figure form. But we're gonna play the trailer for you, and we will come back and talk all about the psychology and all of the other things of Wolfman.
That's funny. Another dog.
No, that's a wolf.
A wolf and a star. What does that mean?
I thought you said you were psychic.
Oh, I am. But this is only wood and silver, and it hasn't blue eyes.
Well, that's a very rare piece. It shows the wolf and the pentagram, the sign of the werewolf.
Werewolf? What's that?
Well, that's a human being who at certain times of the year changes into a wolf.
You mean runs around on all fours and bites and snaps and bays at the moon?
Oh, even worse than that sometimes.
Stay here.
Whoever is bitten by a werewolf and lives becomes a werewolf himself. Go now, and heaven help you.
Okay, The Wolfman from 1941, directed by George Wagner, written by Kurt Siodmak, and starring Lon Chaney Jr., Evelyn Ankers, Claude Rains, Warren William, Ralph Bellamy, Bela Lugosi, and Amanda as an old woman.
Yes.
Maria Uspenskaya. This actually it has two other Universal monsters in this. This has Claude Rains, who is the Invisible Man, and Bela Lugosi, who of course was Frankenstein in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, and nothing else. Amanda, what happens in The Wolfman?
A British nobleman undergoes a startling transformation when he is bitten by a gypsy werewolf.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
As I was saying before we recorded this, I found many summaries. A lot of them went beat by beat through the whole movie. So you all get the succinct version.
Excellent.
Well, Clay, some things you'll find in this movie have been written for us by this movie.
This is the first film that actually wrote its own things you'll find list for us. Yes.
It delivered all of these unto me, and I quote, wolf, gypsy woman, murder, evil spell, pentagram, wolfsbane, and definite psychic maladjustment. You'll also find the worst meet cute we've seen since the birds.
Yeah. At least the birds had like some weird psychosexual stuff going on. This one
I would
is
argue this one does too, but
okay.
I'm from the 40s, so they're a little more
that's true
under the radar about it.
Yeah, this one just comes off as more creepy.
Yes. And I have to say, kind of bad parenting, but not the worst parenting.
On whose part?
On Larry / Lon Chaney's father's part.
The fact that he beats his son to death with a stick?
Well, that part I wasn't counting, because he doesn't know at the time that it's him. I count the when we talk about the parenting element, I think of it as like when they know they're being a parent.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean? Like I am going to do this because of my child or to my child or whatever.
As opposed to when you don't know you're a parent and you have no responsibilities.
Yes.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think Gwen's dad is okay.
Yeah, that's why this movie doesn't just get a firm questionable parenting.
Yeah.
Because Gwen's dad seems like he stands up for his daughter, even says, outright, I trust my daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very progressive of him.
Yes.
From the 40s or whenever this is supposed to be.
Yes. And wherever.
Yes. So this is the Wolfman. This is a later Universal monster, but this was 1941. By this point, they'd already done Dracula. They'd already done Frankenstein. They'd already done The Mummy. They'd already done sequels to all these movies. At this point, yeah, they've done sequels to all these movies. And this was one of the... I think it's funny how time kind of collapses on itself when you look back at this stuff, because they always group... They're like dinosaurs, right? You know how when you think about dinosaurs, it's like, yeah, there was the Triceratops, the T-Rex, the pterodactyl, the Stegosaurus, and they all existed at the same time and definitely weren't separated.
When you put them together, they made a Megazord.
Yeah, and definitely weren't separated by millions or hundreds of millions of years.
No, in like geographic locations.
No,
absolutely
not at all.
No.
But yeah,
knows that the Earth was flat and all the dinosaurs and man lived side by side.
And then when they died, the Earth turned into a ball.
It's been Education Corner with Clay and Amanda.
That's the secret.
Please don't tell your teacher at school.
The secret of flat Earth they never tell you is the end of the story, when the Earth just melts into a circle.
It just wraps itself around the dinosaurs, and they're still alive.
That's why the bones are inside.
No, they're still alive in the center of the hollow Earth.
Oh, good for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, this you always kind of think of these things as sort of all existing at the same time. But this is a later one, and we were talking a little bit before. Creature from the Black Lagoon isn't until the mid 50s.
Yeah,
and these movies had kind of fallen out of favor at that point. But there's a lot of interesting pedigree, to use a word, to this movie because
are we gonna get a lot of like canine puns in this episode, Clay?
Let's see what happens. There's a lot where you've got Bela Lugosi in this. You've got Claude Rains in this. Lon Chaney Jr. really only has a career because of his dad. And I hate to say that, but like his real name's Creighton.
Aw.
And he had gotten some acclaim playing Lenny in Mice Mice and Men, the first version of that, but kind of didn't have much of a career until his father passed away, and he became Creighton took on the name of Lon Chaney Jr. and they were like, great, we need a new star to put in these monster movies. Let's get the son of the most famous actor ever, slap a junior on there, and that does the work for you. And unfortunately, that's kind of all he's got. I mean, he's not the best actor in the world, and
poor Creighton.
Yeah, I mean, he got a career out of it, but he's fine. But one of the downsides to this movie is you end up in this weird place where we are presented with the most unbelievable thing we've seen in any of these movies. Mm-hmm. All 88 of them we've covered. Yeah. Which is that Lon Chaney is the son of an English lord.
Yeah, Claude Rains.
Yeah. And comes from this, like, they try to cover it up in a couple places by Claude Rains is like, you were just a young boy when you left town. It's
when you ran away to America.
How young are we talking here?
Yeah, I know we have a lot of exposition before we dive into the movie, but even like watching him in this movie, it's like, have you ever been to this town before?
Yeah, right. Yes. Well, that's part of the interesting kind of evolution of the script, because I guess originally they wanted Karloff to do this because they wanted Karloff to do fucking everything.
Yeah.
But in the original, there's a couple main differences in the original version, which is in the original version, you don't know for sure if he's actually turning into a werewolf.
Ooh.
Or if it's just a mental thing.
Yeah.
And also, Larry Talbot is an American who is there specifically to fix the telescope. He's not part of the family.
Oh.
It's a stranger in a strange land kind of thing, where he's out of his element in this European village.
Yes.
And that's the inroad to expose him to all of this lore. And there's a lot of lore in this movie.
Yes.
But yeah, it's an interesting progression into what it became, and it's very unique in the universe. If I'm just babbling, please stop me. It's very unique in the I don't know what the word is, the canon of Universal Monsters, because Lon Chaney is the only person to ever play this character. All of the other characters have been played by multiple actors, but the Wolfman is only Lon Chaney Jr. Huh. Well, at least until they remade it, but we don't talk about that.
Right.
The other fun thing about that, Lon Chaney is also the only actor to have played Frankenstein, Dracula, and the Wolfman, and the Mummy. So he played all four of the big ones.
When was he Dracula?
He was Dracula in Son of Dracula.
Okay.
Which, was that after this? I think that was before this, wasn't it?
I have no idea.
No, it was. It was after this. So yeah, he became a known quantity in the Wolfman. And then he was Dracula in Son of Dracula. He plays Frankenstein. I forget where he plays Frankenstein, but I know that he does. Mm-hmm. And I thought he played. Maybe he doesn't play the Mummy. I think he does.
I believe you.
I'm not 100% on the Mummy, but I know he does play Dracula and Frankenstein.
Yeah.
So he becomes this weird centerpiece because by 1941, or at least after that, Karloff isn't doing these. He's not playing the monster anymore.
Yeah.
Bela Lugosi has been shit canned by the world, apparently, for reasons.
Poor Bella.
Not really warranted. He's got such a strange trek career, especially through these movies.
I feel like and I could be totally wrong, this is an unresearched opinion, probably biased by the fact that I love Bela Lugosi. I think there was just some of that weird racism that people used to have against like Eastern Europeans.
I'm sure that's in there, definitely, because like
when it was like being Hungarian or Polish was like the worst thing you could be.
Yeah, he had to fight to be Dracula.
Yeah,
even though he had been playing it on Broadway, and he got paid very little to do it.
Yeah, and
then after that, it didn't really jumpstart his career the way he wanted to.
Yeah,
he was a little bit of a he had an ego. Like, he was offered Frankenstein, but he turned it down.
Yeah.
And, obviously they gave... that would have been a bad fit anyway.
Yeah,
But in his later career, it's kind of a double-edged sword when you see him pop up in these movies, because he's great in them.
Yeah.
But it's like Bela Lugosi, the guy who nobody would be here without him, is playing the gypsy who gets killed 10 minutes into the movie.
Yes, yeah, who has a first act guest spot and then is promptly killed off.
He plays Igor, the hunchback, in Son of Frankenstein, I think.
That's wild.
And he's great.
Yeah.
And then in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, he plays the monster, and he has no lines. And all he does, the monster wakes up for about 30 seconds at the end so they can fight, and he just goes, ah! And that's basically all he does.
Aww.
But yeah, and obviously he had his drug problem and stuff, so he had his issues. But anyway, what are we talking about? Wolfman?
The Wolfman.
Wolfman.
Yes.
So this is the first kind of new property in a while for Universal, and I have always been amazed at how, frankly, they nail it.
Yeah.
And because this is wholly original. This is not, well, it's not based on a book. It's not based on like the way the Dracula Frankenstein.
Right.
It's like The Mummy isn't based on a book, but it's kind of zeitgeisty, you know?
Yeah.
They had just been opening the tombs and stuff, and so it was kind of on people's mind.
Yeah,
but the
this
Wolfman,
is kind of pulled out of folklore.
Yeah, it's pulled out of folklore. It's written by a writer, his name's Kurt Siodmak, who had fled Germany because the Nazis were on the rise. So a lot of people have read into the Wolfman as being influenced by, I mean, he's even talked about it, seeing people that he thought were normal, upstanding people turn into monsters, really.
Yeah.
And which is, man, there's this great book that I read when I was doing research. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I don't mean to talk at you. I promise I will turn it over to you shortly.
Just get it all out now.
There's this great book that I read called, when I was doing research for Bloody Hell, called Wasteland, which is about the author's thesis that World War I essentially created modern horror, because he basically tracks all of the most influential people who were working in movies, art, poetry, who all lived through, and some of them actually fought during World War I.
Yeah.
And looks at how that conflict clearly shaped what was going on. And it really continues up through what was going on with the Nazis and stuff. Like, I'm going cross-eyed. I've dove into the deep end, and I apologize. Anyway, Wolfman.
Yeah.
Great movie. What do you think?
No.
I'm sorry. I was saying to you earlier. When I first got all of these movies on like DVD, I watched everything. I watched all the behind the scenes stuff, and I just like knew it all.
Yeah.
And now I'm just like, it's just vomiting out of my brain.
It's really funny because as we were prepping to record this episode, Clay was sitting there all going, "Oh, I should have done more homework. I didn't put any of this together. I didn't know." Then you we start recording and you open your mouth and it all just wholesale is still in that part of your brain.
The problem is though, it's not structured.
Yeah.
It's just going to come out.
Yeah.
Such as one thing I wanted to bring up, which we can use this as a jumping off point to get into the movie.
Let's do it.
We talked about the things that are in this movie.
Yes.
Can you tell me the one thing that is not in this movie?
Ooh.
Which should be in this movie?
Oh gosh. My first instinct when it's with you is that there's no magic book.
No. Well, technically there is, because it's more of a science book, which isn't that really magic? Yeah. No, it's more based in the character.
No pictures of the moon?
There is no moon in this movie.
Yeah.
One of the big things that changed is the poem that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Which is the classic poem, "Only a man who is pure of heart and says his prayers at night, even a man who is pure of heart and says his prayers at night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright."
Yeah.
There's no moon. In the next one, they change it to full moon. So that's where that comes from.
Interesting.
And there's, again, sorry, diving off in the deep end. All of the werewolf lore that everybody knows comes from this movie. It comes from Kurt Siodmak. It's not from a book. Yeah. It's not from ancient Romanian whatever. He made it all, 90% of it up. Yeah. Which I think is another instance of this movie just like really nailing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, so the wolfsbane.
Please talk for like 20 minutes.
I'm trying, Clay. The wolfsbane one is somewhat part of folklore. I don't know if it was specifically tied to like. I guess it was because it was used as a anti-lycanthropy quote unquote cure. Problem is that wolfsbane is, it's a real plant. It's a beautiful purple flower. They look lovely. They're very poisonous. So if you make somebody eat it to cure their lycanthropy, you just killed them.
Hey, mission accomplished.
Yeah, and it's interesting because some of the symptoms of poisoning based off of it kind of present like rabies. You froth at the mouth, you can have seizures, that kind of stuff. So it's an interesting little tie-in and that it works really well. So he was definitely getting some research from somewhere.
Sure.
Like he'd heard enough to piece together a mythology that kind of makes sense,
Yeah, it is. I've always just been impressed by it because it's the kind of world building and lore that is essentially bulletproof because
except silver bullet.
Except silver, yeah. Because when you come away from this movie, you do not question it at all whether or not it's like, oh yeah, this is just what werewolves.
Yeah, this is just how werewolves work.
If I looked up a book anywhere about werewolves,
cycles of the moon, silver will kill them,
exactly.
blah blah blah. Yeah,
all created for this movie.
Yeah, and I think the thing that makes it work is that he keeps it simple enough.
He does. The thing that I noticed this time is there's a lot of like loose lore floating around.
Oh, there is, definitely.
Definitely gets trimmed down as the movies go on. Yes.
He keeps basic. It's like it's the moon triggers it. Silver can kill you. If you're bitten by a wolf, if you're bitten by the werewolf and survive, you become a werewolf. I think he starts to get a little too fancy with the pentagrams.
Yeah, once they get into the pentagrams and the necklace thing, and there's a couple... Yeah.
Well, the necklace thing you can kind of write off as just like superstition.
True, yeah.
I'm going to use the word gypsy throughout this, even though it is vaguely offensive these days. Or, I don't know, maybe very offensive. I have no idea. But I'm just going to stick with the terminology that the movie uses because it's a fictional
It's good enough for Cher. It's good enough for us.
Well, we don't even know where this happens.
That's the thing. Yeah, I did want to talk about that because we covered this when we watched Frankenstein. This is I think this movie is the closest you get to like fairy tale like from the Universal movies because they have this vaguely European village, which is the same place they shot Frankenstein. It's all in the Universal backlot, but it's these buildings that need to double for just Europe.
Right. They have to be sort of British countryside, but also Bavarian.
Right.
It's also
they
Eastern
tend to skew
European.
Bavarian. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I read somewhere that this is supposedly Wales.
Sure.
Which feels like something in 1941 that you could just say to Americans, like, yeah, that's what Wales is like. And they'd be like, okay.
Yeah, most of them hadn't been there.
Sure.
But, you set it in this sort of vague locale that has these European kind of Bavarian buildings, but it also has this amazing forest of these like short, squat trees that are very, very, I guess, filmic because they don't go up that high.
And they're spaced out.
Like
the forest feels somehow both dense and very orderly.
It weirdly
way.
I always thought it felt kind of like an apple orchard, sort of.
Yeah, it sort of does.
Yeah, a very foggy apple orchard.
Yes.
And then on top of that, they are casting. I think the way that they cast this, aside from the fact that there are no people of color in this movie, is very similar to the way they cast a lot of period pieces now. And not for the same reasons, obviously, but where they're kind of like, who cares if there were not Hispanic people in England in the 1700s? We want this person to play Bridgerton or whatever,
Yeah.
And what it does in this movie, at least, is creates this weird community of English people, very blue-collar American people like Lon Chaney.
Yes.
And then you've got that weird sort of mid-Atlantic accent going on.
Yes,
You've got gypsies.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of all over the place, and it creates this real fairy tale-like place with all this dense fog, and like you don't know where the city ends and stuff.
And the town feels both small and large at the same time, which is interesting. Like, there's a lord who lives in a castle, but there's also like an antique shop.
Yeah.
Which feels like a weirdly, I'm sure this is just my own bias, but like feels like such a weirdly modern concept to have in your small town.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure this is just my ignorance, but like a small town somewhere in Europe.
Yeah.
In 1940 having an antique shop just feels a little like, who's antiquing here?
Right. It almost feels like this is an amusement park or something.
Yes.
Like it's like the Busch Gardens version of Bavaria.
Yes. It's in Epcot.
Yeah, and then, like, you've got Lord Talbot, who lives in Talbot Castle.
Yes.
But I don't think he has any, like, he doesn't seem to have any political. He doesn't seem to have any political power.
He holds some because he's always meeting with the constable.
Mm-hmm.
The constable's kind of always around his castle. He seems to have the town doctor on retainer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and the town doctor for a lot of small towns for a very long time is like a very important figure in the town.
We're watching Deadwood on the other podcast. The doctor is very important.
There you go. And he does kind of continually coach Larry, like, you need to get to know people here. You need to get comfortable here. You're going to run the estate. So I think it is one of those kind of classic, or supposed to be one of those classic British lord setups where he owns a ton of the land.
Yeah.
Like, Gwen's fiance is employed by Larry's father, Sir Talbot.
It feels like everybody is.
Right. So I think that's the political power he
true.
has. He's maybe not like the mayor or like an elected official that they've chosen, but it is still this sort of like only slightly modernized step away from feudalism.
Yeah.
Where he owns the land, which means that he owns the game on the land.
Right.
He owns what's grown probably on the land. He employs enough people in the town that he kind of gets to boss them around.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it makes it a really interesting... I think, when you were talking about how this script evolved from Larry's character just being purely this outsider who's come in to work on the telescope and has like no attachment to the town.
Yeah.
I kind of, as much as I don't believe that he's Claude Rains' son, I like the change that they gave him some sort of root and reason to be there.
Let's get into that a little bit, because I have always found that to be very interesting, because they drop some stuff on you at the beginning just kind of casually.
Yeah.
Which is that Larry has a brother. Also, it's like his Lord fucking Larry Talbot. No.
I'm sure he's a
like
Lawrence.
King Ralph. But they mention he has a brother who's died, and I can't remember how they say he died.
Hunting accident,
yeah. Quote unquote.
Yes.
Which is, and the reason for Larry coming back is because his brother died.
Yeah.
And they never really do anything with that, but it does create this interesting setup of this family coming back together, and the prodigal son thing, which is an interesting take. And that's the kind of stuff that I find makes this a lot more, even if they don't get into it, there's more to grab onto than some of the other movies.
Definitely.
Yeah,
and I think it adds a really complex social aspect to what ends up happening to Larry, where first he's kind of stepping out with a girl that he shouldn't be because she's engaged. And I actually, to back myself up, I love that she won't tell him he won't tell her his last name. At first he's like, just call me Larry.
Yeah.
She doesn't find out until after her friend is killed and the wolf / Bella is killed, who he really is in town. And then later on, when he's suspected of murder and also seems to kind of be losing it, the townspeople are gossiping, but no one will really confront him. No one will really do anything about it because he's the Lord's son.
Yeah.
So he's an outsider. So they're very ready to suspect him. They're very ready to disbelieve him when he says, no, I know I saw a wolf. They're like, sure, yeah, right. Because he feels like a stranger. But at the same time, he holds this social standing and this position in the town where they can't go directly after him.
I never thought about that, but yeah, you're right. It really does give Larry this buffer.
Yeah.
To make the movie kind of work.
Yeah.
Because if he was an outsider and all of a sudden he's like, no, you don't understand. It's a wolf. They'd be like, okay, we're going to either kick you out of the town or we will kill you.
Right. Or we're going to lock you up in the jail.
Right.
Or something. And they don't do any of that. And it also makes...
This is a movie about white privilege. That's what it is.
It kind of. Because also I think it explains Sir John's desperation to sort of shut Larry up and be like, stop it. Like, you're not, none of this is true. You don't actually believe any of this. This gypsy woman's filling your head with nonsense. You just need to rest and get over it. Because this is his last living heir.
Right.
This is all he has left.
Right.
If something happens to Larry or Larry's driven off, the line ends. They lose everything. And for those kinds of, families that go back hundreds of, he says something like, this has been our family home for 300 years.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to be the guy who lets all of that fall apart.
Yeah. I felt like a more modern take on this would have had, or I should say, one of the things that I found kind of refreshing about it is that Lord Talbot, is his first name or just call him Lord?
John. Sir John is legitimately loves his son. Yeah, he does seem to.
They have kind of a bit of the, uptight British thing.
I love their first conversation where
clearly there was a reason Larry left, obviously.
Yes. But it seems like maybe losing his first son has made him realize, oh shit, like I fucked up. And I need to do it right this time. I've lost my older son. My younger son has returned home. I have a second chance with him that I'm never going to get with my older son.
Right.
I want to do it right this time. And he even kind of gives this, our family has been known for being very reserved and we've taken that to an extreme and to a fault, and let's not do that anymore. Like, I want to be there for you. And
the village field day competition is coming up, and he doesn't have a partner for the three-legged race.
Yes.
So he needs to make sure Larry and he are on good terms.
That partnership in the three-legged race is not going to work because Claude Rains is about 18 inches shorter than Lon Chaney.
Lon Chaney's a big dude.
He is remarkably sized. There is a moment, I actually wrote it down when Sir John and Sir John and the constable, I think his name was like Paul or something, are in the house before Larry comes in the room, and you get a split second of them talking to one another, and the constable's going, he's a big boy. He's huge.
Yeah.
We could have used some of him on the force or something like that.
Look at the size of this asshole. Yeah, but, John, he seems to love his son, or at least he seems to be want to have a relationship with him.
Yeah.
And I think the more modern take on this would be the opposite, where Larry comes home and it's very icy. Did you ever see the remake?
Nothing like your you're nothing like your older brother. He would have known what to do, blah, blah, blah.
Did you ever see the remake with Benicio del Toro that did?
No.
We'll talk a little bit more about that later. It's not very good.
Aww.
But I think that's what they do in the remake is that he comes home and his relationship with his father is very icy. And it's not great. Yeah,
this movie does, it makes a couple different choices with the interpersonal relationships. I don't want to label them as progressive because I think that's such a loaded word, but like they avoid what I think of as the cliched option a few times.
Sure.
Like when Larry finally meets Gwen's fiance, it's an awkward meeting.
Yep.
But even after he leaves, the fiance is like, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to be rude, but he was holding the cane. And I know that's what they say that guy was murdered with. And it just freaked me out. Mm-hmm. And then the next time they run into him, the fiance explicitly says to Gwen, no, let's go say hi. Let's go invite him to spend the rest of the fair with us. I want to show you, like, I'm not jealous. I don't hold anything against him.
He's a real James Marsden, that one.
But they avoid the cliched relationship, which would have been purely confrontational.
And I think it's interesting because based on those lines, I think you could play it more confrontational. You
could, but he even also says to Gwen at some point, like, I just want you to be careful because I think there's something tragic about that man.
Yeah.
So he's not saying he's dangerous or he's a bad guy or whatever. He just... it's just sort of this, like, I don't know, there's something going on there, and I'm worried for the woman I love. I don't want to see you get hurt because of whatever's happening with him. It seems less about Larry. You know what I mean? He's not like, who do you think you are, coming in and trying to steal my woman?
It's one of the things that I thought was notable too is for all of the sort of condensing it seems like they did with the idea where it's like, all right, well, let's make Larry part of the family. Let's make sure he's actually a wolf. Like one of the things that I picked up on that I feel like would have been an easy way to condense it, but probably would have been a more cliche thing to do is I feel like Gwen's fiance should have been the sheriff, because the game warden isn't really a character. He's just kind of there, whereas the sheriff is actively involved and actively antagonistic towards whoever's doing this stuff. So I think the more what's the word? I think it would be a more obvious choice to make her fiance someone who is more of an aggressive counterpoint.
Sure.
But they don't.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a weird balance because it makes both of those characters, the game warden and the sheriff, feel a bit more peripheral. Because I don't know what what Gwen's fiance is there to do other than for her to say, I have a fiance. You know what I mean?
Set traps.
That's true. He does set traps.
He sets traps, and
but
he
even
leads
so,
the hunt.
he's the game warden. It feels like, okay, let's say, sure, her fiance's the game warden.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm surprised he's not more of a antagonistic force. He's just kind of there doing his thing, trying to catch whatever's doing this. But it's not like I think the more modern version of this would have been like, oh, this is the fucking game warden. Look at all these things he's killed. He's going to find this thing and get it.
He's just in a room full of taxidermy.
Exactly. Yeah. Or he's like, you know, Larry meets him and he's wearing like a leopard skin coat or some shit.
Coonskin cap on.
Or he's just got a full wolf headdress that he skinned himself.
That's also a cape.
Yes. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
I'm not saying that's what they should have done.
No, I see what you're saying. But, you know, one reason why, regardless, however they chose it, one reason I'm glad there is a game warden is because it really does play into that fairy tale aspect.
Yes, yeah.
It reminds you of Little Red Riding Hood, where it is...
Which they name drop as a werewolf story.
Yes, they do. And he's not a game warden. I think he's a woodcutter or something like that.
The woodsman, yeah.
The woodsman,
so.
yeah.
Also, I don't know if Red Riding Hood is a werewolf story, really, but the wolf puts on the grandmother's clothes, but I don't think anybody turns in. Anyway, we're splitting hairs.
Look, there's a whole background to that about pedophilia. Let's not go there. But I like having that sort of fairy tale character included. So it's not just sort of another cop movie.
Well, the game warden feels like the more natural character than the sheriff does.
Yeah.
Like it feels like they should be combined into one character. And
I get what you're saying.
It should be the game warden, not a sheriff, because the game warden feels very fairy tale like. As soon as you say the sheriff and you see this guy, it feels very modern.
What are you talking about? You mean this guy who talks like this?
Yeah, and so it's like it is this weird straddling.
Take a note.
It is this weird straddling of time periods where they're not committing to either style. Yeah. And so you end up with this strange amorphous
men in overcoats and fedoras, but then also like gypsy fortune tellers in foggy woods.
It's like The Simpsons, where you go 10 miles in one direction, it's the desert, 10 miles in the other direction, it's the snow. You know, it's
we're just gonna tick all the boxes.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the meet cute and the psychosexual undertones of Larry Talbot peeping through a telescope on Gwen?
Yeah. So one of my notes from when we were watching this, one of my earlier notes is the implication that he is kind of already a wolf.
Sure.
You know,
because he does.
There's something wolfish about him in that kind of old timey use of the word, where he's a little bit of, he's a skirt chaser kind of.
He's like a cartoon wolf who goes to
who
does the
wolf whistling. Yep. Yeah. He kind of arrives in town and gets his hands on that telescope and then is immediately on the prowl. Yeah. Like everybody's sort of in his sight lines, and he's looking for prey in a way, and then he goes and kind of ambushes her and corners her into hanging out with him, and I think she likes him.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's written to show that she's open to this, even if she knows it's against her better judgment. But yeah, there's a predatory element to his behavior towards Gwen at the beginning of the movie. And then he finds out that she's engaged and he doesn't stop.
Right.
Like, he kind of keeps pursuing her. And I don't know, I guess that kind of plays into the whole, they hammer home repeatedly that Sir John especially talks a lot about how werewolf stories are really about the dual nature of man.
Sure.
How there's good and evil inside of all of us. There's, kind of the civilization versus wild. And
I guess if you wanted to be technical, push up your nerd glasses, you could say that the Wolfman is kind of a Jekyll and Hyde story.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, where it's sort of like his baser impulses are not under his control. Like, he's not always making the smartest choice or doing the quote-unquote right thing that, like society would agree is the right thing. Sometimes he's just going to chase the pretty girl because he wants the pretty girl. He doesn't really care if she's already promised to another man.
Would it work on you if someone came into your place of work and was like, I really like those earrings that you wore in your bedroom 10 minutes ago that I saw.
Call the police. I would call the cops immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's I feel that their relationship is the thing in the movie that feels the most cliche.
Yeah.
Because, like, I don't know. I don't necessarily... I think the way he comes on to her is so egregious and weird.
Yes.
That it feels very movie-ish for her to kind of be into it.
Yeah, and they feel like they're on such unequal footing. Like, I know I sort of jokingly compared it to the main characters meeting in The Birds.
Yes.
But at least in that, like, he's a lawyer in The Birds, and he kind of knows more about, or he thinks he knows more about her past. Mm-hmm. But she's an independently wealthy woman.
Right.
So they're...
Is she? I completely forgot about that.
She is. She's rich. She's from a very, very wealthy family. That's why she jets around to Italy and whatever, and she wears fur coats all day.
Right.
And
right.
She can just afford to drop everything and take her car and drive up the coast. Like... they meet sort of more as equals.
Yeah.
In that. Whereas in this, Gwen is a shop girl working at her father's store. Mm-hmm. Like, that's it. That's all she's got. Like, she's kind of waiting to get married, but she's still very much treated as someone's daughter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he is the son of the Lord who's traveled and lived in America, and now he's back, and he's coming from a position of, like, wealth and privilege in the town that I, to be fair to him, don't think he fully understands.
Oh, definitely not. Yeah.
He seems like he's maybe become accustomed to just being like a normal
Well, like you said,
person.
He doesn't tell her what his name is. Like, he has an understanding, and he has an understanding that it's weird.
Yes.
That, like, he doesn't understand it, but he knows that
it makes other people react to him in a certain way, and he doesn't want that.
Yeah.
But it's still just, it's so unequal between the two of them, and he knows nothing about her.
Right.
And throughout the movie, he learns nothing about her.
Yeah. It is, I find that this movie is, it's kind of a masterclass in storytelling to a certain extent, because this movie's like 75 minutes long.
Yeah.
But I do not think it feels that short. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. It just, every single scene in the movie is efficient at telling you more of the story.
Yeah.
And giving you only what you need.
Yeah.
Like, you see the town, but you only see the parts of the town you need. Mm-hmm. Just enough to get an idea of how these people are, how they react to Larry, what the relationship is. Like, then the gypsies show up. You get a scene with that. You get the thing with the wolf.
Yep.
And then like very quickly he's been bitten. Like it's the relationship with him and Gwen is, again, that's where you're probably doing a bit of shortcutting just based on like movie tropes and stuff.
Right.
But even still, it's like they really only give you all you need, where it's like, yeah, they meet, she's engaged. That's weird. He's kind of into her.
Yeah.
She's kind of into him.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. It's clear, like, she's beautiful. So what's there not to like?
Right. Yeah.
He's the wealthy son of the Lord. Of like, why wouldn't she be? And he is like, in equal measure, creepy and awkward, but also endearing. You know, like he tries to be charming towards her. He tries to kind of have a sense of humor about things.
Yeah.
So I think they just let that stand in for the rest.
Yeah, I think you could look at this movie and go, wow, there's a lot of stuff on the plate here that they just don't get into.
Yeah.
But I think, on the other hand, when you finish watching the movie, I don't think you feel like you didn't get enough, Yeah. At least I think you could, if they wanted to, they probably could have stretched out the werewolf stuff a bit more.
Yeah.
But even so, it's like, I don't know, to do what?
Yeah, it's kind of like
in the remake.
How much more do you need?
In the remake, which I'm sure is like 2 hours long or whatever.
Yeah.
Larry ends up getting sent to London, and he's getting examined by doctors and shit. And there's this big set piece where he turns into a wolf and is like running through the London rooftops and stuff. And it's like, yeah, you don't need that shit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
Sorry, I was just saying, even the Wolfman stuff, it's like 2 scenes.
Yeah, he's not
a ton of
Wolfman a lot.
Anyway, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. It's one of these movies where, like, if you start to pick apart any individual little thing or relationship or scene, you can start to sort of say, like, well, they could have maybe fleshed this out more, or they could have done more with X. But when you take the whole movie together as one experience, it's like, yeah, you come back to like, well, yeah, but would they have really needed that?
Yeah.
Or in the end, how much of a difference would it have made?
Right.
If they had added more to the growing relationship between Larry and Gwen.
Yeah.
They don't end up together, so we don't need to know if they're compatible or not. You know what I mean?
And they don't do the thing that I feel like they would do a lot in a movie, a modern movie now, where it's Gwen who kills him, and they have some like overwrought final scene together.
Yeah.
Like it's really interesting that it's the father who kills him.
Absolutely.
Like that's really interesting.
Yeah, especially because the reason he kills him is both because he doesn't believe him enough and because he starts to believe him. Right. So it's this weird, like, he doesn't believe Larry when Larry says, I'm a werewolf. I'm doing this. I can't help myself. I am transforming into a beast and going out and trying to kill people. Yeah. And I can't stop. He kind of ties him up at home, but then later he goes out and kind of is looking for him, but still, so he believes him enough to believe, yes, you can't control yourself when you're out here trying to kill people, but he doesn't believe him enough when he's confronted by the wolf to not just start fucking wailing on him with the silver staff. Yeah. And he effectively does what it seems like he's so desperate to not do at the beginning of the movie. Like I was saying earlier, it seems like he's really focused on, I don't want to fuck up. Like, I have one chance with my one remaining child who is the future of my entire lineage. I don't want to fuck this up. I don't want to drive him away. Yeah. I want to make this work. And then he ends up being responsible for doing exactly what he was afraid of.
Yeah, I think the dad character is what changes this from being like David Cronenberg's The Fly. Yeah. Because there's another version where it plays more that way. And I think is probably the more, even at this time, probably the more traditional way they would do it is focus more on the love story. Yeah. Where the real relationship in the movie probably gets as much screen time as Larry and Gwen is. Maybe Larry and his dad. More. Yeah.
Yeah. Because he's sort of in the background of a lot. They share a lot more scenes together in groups.
And they also, Gwen is there to serve the purpose that she does.
Yeah.
But John, even when Larry's not around, is talking about this and like considering what's going on.
Yes.
And processing this stuff in a way that Gwen's just not.
Right, and I think that's a dual thing because he is this father figure not just to Larry but to the whole town.
Yeah.
Like he takes on this role of responsibility towards the prosperity of not just his own estate but all the families that are attached to it. So it's this very old-fashioned idea of what, being a lord or a member of that class should be doing and what they should be responsible for. It's like an idea of having a higher social responsibility because of your position.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting because I think you don't often get like a positive view of that.
Sure.
In a lot of these movies, like if you look at Dracula for example, he is.
Don't look at him; he'll hypnotize you.
But he is a lord of his castle. It's his ancestral land, and instead of trying to care for the people on it and the land itself, he's sucking it dry. He's leeching the strength and prosperity away from it and destroying it. And his people live in fear and terror. And then you go to the Talbot family, and they seem like they're trying, maybe not succeeding, but trying to have a more like, that sort of benign paternal attitude towards the people around them.
What's really interesting is in the sequels where Lawrence Talbot shows up, which he's kind of like the modern Superman in that he got his own movie, and then the sequel to that was Frankenstein meets the Wolfman.
Huh.
There's no Wolfman, son of Wolfman. It's just Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, like Batman versus Superman.
Yeah.
Actually, it's very similar because the next one after that is House of Frankenstein, which is they get all the monsters together like the Justice League. And then House of Dracula after that. But in those movies, what's fascinating is in a movie full of monsters, they always position Larry as the hero.
Interesting.
I shouldn't say not quite a hero like an Errol Flynn type, but of the monsters, he is the one who is just trying to do good. He's trying to get rid of his affliction, and so he always ends up like fighting Dracula or fighting the monster. It's actually the Frankenstein meets the Wolfman is I love it. It's the return of Larry is one of the
that's what the subtitle of the movie should be.
Is
The Return of Larry
is an awesome like super creepy sequence where these two like grave robbers go in and find his tomb and they open his casket and it's just Larry. It's just Larry. What can I say?
You were just writing the subtitle.
That's the sitcom.
Secondary.
It's just Larry.
It's just Larry.
But he hasn't started to decay or anything,
right?
And he's covered with wolfsbane. And the way they try to explain him coming back is they remove the wolfsbane and that brings him back to life. But once he comes back to life, for the rest of his appearances in the movies, all he wants to do is die. Because he can't figure out how to die. He's like the Incredible Hulk. The Hulk won't let Bruce Banner die.
Yeah.
And so it's this really different take on a character where, it's not Dracula who wants to suck the life out and live. It's not the Frankenstein monster who, I don't know what he wants. Not really anything. But he's like, I just don't want to be here anymore.
Right. Well, because even with like Frankenstein monster is made of pieces of people, but does that make him a person?
Right.
Like, does that make him fully human?
Right.
Does he have memories of like how? That's a question throughout those movies. Is like, how human is he? There are glimmers of it. There are certain, I think, interpretations you can put on it. But then there's other times where it's just like, how could he possibly relate to like truly understand what it is to be human? And that's why he's considered a monster.
Yeah, like would he understand TikTok?
I mean, I don't think that's the litmus test for being human. And if it is,
not anymore.
I don't want to live on this planet anymore. Whereas Larry, as we're affectionately calling him, is just a guy.
Right.
Like other than the werewolf thing, he's just a guy.
Yeah.
And I also, this is something I wanted to make sure I brought up. I find it fascinating that he is punished for doing the right thing.
Yeah.
He goes to save a woman's life.
Yep.
He tries to save her. He fails, and he's punished.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that so interesting because more often...
It's a very cynical view of the world.
It is. But I find that really fascinating for a movie from this era and a movie that's kind of treated like, you know, like kind of the classic haunted house horror movie.
Yeah.
Like, people kind of dismiss these movies. I think a lot still. And I find it really interesting that what does that say about, you know, what it means to try and do good in the world? It seems like everyone in this movie is actually trying to be a good person. Right. Yeah. Like, even the cop who can kind of be a jerk sometimes to Larry, he's just trying to do his job. Yeah. He lives in this town. He's from this town. He spent his whole life in this town, and people keep dying. Right. Yeah. And it's his job to protect the people of the town, and he can't, and he wants to. So he just wants, you know, he's just trying to do the right thing too. Everyone in this movie is trying to do the right thing. Yeah. And everyone is punished for it.
Yeah, the cop there's no Gaston in this movie.
Exactly.
There feels like there should be. And I think that's what I was getting at earlier. Like, that's the character that's missing.
Yeah, and the cop inches up towards it because he and Larry have a couple moments where they bump heads in conversation because the cop doesn't believe that it's a werewolf. He's like, no, this is a murderer. Like, this is somebody running around killing people, and I need to catch him.
Yeah. It's a small town. Maybe he's just not a good cop.
Right.
Yeah, I was just thinking that the difference between Larry and Dracula, this is not a stand-up bit, is maybe it is when anytime Dracula comes back, he's always like, finally, I have returned.
Yes.
And anytime Larry comes back, he's like, God damn it. But I do want to talk about Bela and the gypsies, Maria Uspenskaya, who there's no magic book, but Maria Uspenskaya is basically the magic book of this movie.
She is a walking, talking, living magic book, and I love her.
I can't say that she is the first of this type because the harbinger, the gypsy harbinger, is something that does...
Everybody knows I love a harbinger.
Yes.
She is one of my faves.
She's fantastic.
Yeah. And it's her and Ralph all the way, baby.
They would make a good couple.
Aww.
But that character is taken from, like, Dracula has some gypsy harbingers in it.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure they probably exist somewhere else. But she is fantastic. She's... I feel like this section of the movie is what made Sam Raimi do Drag Me to Hell.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, no, I love her. I love that whole archetype. I also think this movie treats gypsies with a surprising amount of respect.
Yeah, they do.
You know, like it would have been a lot. There's some disdainful comments and things like that. But it would have been a lot easier. I feel like the more modern version of this movie would not put the suspicion on Larry quite so fast. Mm-hmm. I think it would turn more into a, well, you know, that horrible gypsy attacked that woman. Right. And Larry must have tried to defend her. Yeah. And he's such a good guy that he blocked it out, that he beat this man to death.
There is something interesting there, though, where you have a story that traditionally that would be about the people being afraid of the outsider, who ultimately don't see that the problem is someone the calls from coming from inside the house. You know?
Right? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting because this sort of general attitude towards gypsies or Romani people were that they were just bad, that they were criminals, that they were swindlers, that they came into town and were just like an undesirable element and you wanted them out of your town. And I could sort of see a version of this movie where a gypsy man getting killed and being found, having his body found near a local woman's body in the woods.
Sure. Yeah.
Having it just be like, well, he got what he deserved. Who gives a shit? Now they've all left town. Good.
They
Good
don't really
riddance.
comment on that at all.
No, in fact, they seem really driven to figure out what happened to him. And then it's also kind of I love the conversation between the gypsy woman and the priest when they bring Bella's
oh sure, yeah,
coffin to the cemetery.
Yeah.
And they have this whole back and forth where he's like, I hear you people are gonna parade into town dancing and singing, and this is disrespectful and I can't allow you to do it. And she kind of retorts, well, according to our beliefs and according to yours as well, he's gone to a better place.
Right, yeah.
Like, he's in heaven now, and this is how we commemorate that. We celebrate that for him because he's in a better world than this one now. Isn't that what you believe?
Right.
And he hates it, but he can't argue with it. And so he says, oh, okay. And they get to have their funeral celebration.
And then she's like, have you ever had funnel cake? Because trust me, it's amazing.
But I find this movie, it's always really surprising how these like social commentary moments kind of always come out in a way that's more like, oh, that was shockingly fair and even-handed of you.
And I always, how much of that is modern reading,
Right.
Like I'm sure that there is, I don't want to undersell what they were doing at the time, because I think these movies have more baked into them than people give them credit for. Yeah. Which is basically the whole concept of that book I was talking about earlier. Like, you want to see a really fucking weird movie? It's a movie called, I believe it's The Black Cat with, where's the Raven? I think it's The Black Cat with Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi. It's the first time that they were in a movie together.
This is really familiar. I'm trying to remember.
And it's like just pre-code before they started like bringing the hammer down with the regulations, I think, or maybe it's post. I forget. Anyway, it's in there.
Yeah.
And it's about like the two of them served together in the First World War, and one of them was like a field medic. And I can't remember why they end up crossing paths again, but like you find out that Boris Karloff stole Bela Lugosi's wife and now keeps her in like this weird suspended animation.
Oh, like literally stole her.
Like literally stole.
Oh, okay.
And
like she was a piece of property.
Kind of.
And he took her.
And there's like this weird subtextual like BDSM kind of stuff going on, and the end of the movie is you see the silhouette shadow on the wall of, I think it's Karloff, like essentially crucified, getting skinned alive, and it has nothing to do with the Edgar Allan Poe story that it's based off of. But it's like, it's one of those ones where it's like, you want to see a really weird one that you can get into psychologically, watch this one.
Yeah. No, and I'm not trying to argue that like somebody sat down and made these decisions of we're going to show like good progressive politics in this movie. Like, I don't think that was the case. I guess I feel like it was the sort of movie where when he sat down to write it, it was like, I want these people to feel like real humans.
And again, I mean, not to put too much, hindsight into this, but the guy did just escape Nazi Germany.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you can see that. The
Romani people were part of the people targeted by the Nazis.
Yep. Yeah. And treating it like everybody is coming from a position where they think they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And even so, even when, and I think that's kind of the point of the Wolfman itself, is like, even when you want to be good, sometimes you're not. Yeah. And you can't help it.
We should probably talk about the actual Wolfman in this movie.
Yeah. Larry.
What do you think of? Well, I've been endlessly tickled by the transformation scene where after he becomes the Wolfman, he decides to put on a really nicely tailored shirt.
Yes.
And they do this stuff a few times in these movies, obviously because they don't have the capabilities or the budget to do like a full body whatever.
Right.
Like they did
and it would probably have been scandalous.
Yeah. The movie before this that had a very similar makeup was an adaptation of The Island of Dr. Moreau called The Island of Lost Souls. And that one is very highly regarded. I saw it once a long time ago, but I can't remember what I thought of it at the time. But you see all these creatures on this island in the middle of the Caribbean or whatever.
All wearing like...
They're all wearing shirts buttoned up to the neck. You know, you've got Bela Lugosi.
This is our fish man.
Yeah.
And he's got a button-down shirt on.
Bela Lugosi plays like the lead monster or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's got this crazy like wolf ape kind of makeup going on.
Yeah.
That covers his entire face and then goes into a tight collared white shirt that's very nice. You know, I always found that very silly is that he found the time to make himself look nice before he went out to, I guess, choke people to death.
Nice tailored suit for the Wolfman that he just happened to have laying around.
Yeah. What do you think of his look, the design and the makeup and stuff?
I think it's a little too clean.
Yeah, he does look like he
looks like he has a blowout.
He looks a bit.
He got brushed and combed, and he's pomaded his fur.
Yeah. Have you seen Teen Wolf?
Yes.
Michael J. Fox.
Yes.
Remember when he goes to the prom?
Yes.
And he spends he kind of has that vibe where
he does.
After Larry turned into the Wolfman, he's like, this looks good.
Yeah, like he's a little too coiffed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I always find it confusing that he's like a wolf man, whereas Bela is just a wolf.
Yeah, well, I think he's a German Shepherd. I think they used a dog for that. But I always kind of, my head canon was like, maybe Bella's just been a wolf longer than Larry has.
Okay, yeah, maybe it takes a couple autumn moons before you. Sure, I'm willing to buy that. But I mean, I like it in the sense that it's very iconic. You know, like I think it looks great in those shots where it kind of shows him running out in the forest.
Yeah.
In those moments, but yeah, I think he's a little too prettied up, and I think the full suit is a little much.
Yeah, I think they really get a lot out of this makeup because like I said, he's only in a couple scenes, but they basically spend those scenes having him like. What's the word I'm looking for? Like, not skulk, but like prowl.
Yeah.
Through the foggy woods.
Yeah, he's just generally menacing around.
And then they get him to end on like a perfectly uplit shot that really accents the those feel really kind of dreamlike and weird scenes because they're just there to get you're getting your money shot of the makeup.
And I will say that they do a great job of making him not look like himself.
Yeah.
You know, like
I've always been shocked that that's actually him under there because it does not look like it.
I had to Google that because I really thought it wasn't.
Yeah.
But I like that detail because it makes him more inhuman, but it also makes it believable that people who encounter the Wolfman wouldn't immediately go, Larry?
Yeah. Yes.
Is that you?
You look terrible.
Yeah.
Actually, I take that back. You look fantastic.
Yeah, you look great.
There's another werewolf movie that predates this called Werewolf of London. It's a Universal movie where it's got a lot more. The lore's a lot sweatier in that movie, where it's like these two
sweatier.
Yeah. One of the podcasts I listen to uses that as an adjective, and it's always good. It's like there's two scientists who are trying to find the secrets of a wolf something flower that grows in the Himalayas.
Okay.
And when one of them goes out there, he ends up getting bit by a wolf, and then he turns into a werewolf. It's a lot more. It's just not as tight.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll show you what the makeup for that looks like. But,
like you've expanded out a little too far in that one, maybe.
What the hell did I say this movie was called? Werewolf of London?
Werewolf of London. Not an American Werewolf Inn.
Is that what it's called? Werewolf of London, yeah. So if you see the makeup here, it's like there's a lot more of the actor's face coming through, and it's got like this big dip widow peak.
Yeah, their emphasis on the bottom teeth.
Yeah, and he kind of in the movie he kind of it feels a lot more Jekyll and Hyde like because he's sort of like prowling. I think at one point he's got like a nice little hat on. And he's got a scarf that he wears.
Man, these werewolves really know how to dress.
Yeah, well, I saw a werewolf drinking a pina colada at Trader Vic's. His hair was perfect.
Is that more Meatloaf?
No, that was Werewolves of London. But yeah, I think they got the right mix here, where he's very unnatural looking, and I think
I just wish he was roughed up a little bit.
Yeah,
like just a little more tousled, a little more, like I don't know, just a little less polished. That's all I want. Like I think the makeup itself actually looks really great.
Yeah.
But I just wish, his hair was kind of ruffled or something. Yeah.
I think the transformation's really good.
Yeah.
They get better as the movies go on. There's one.
But it is surprising for the time period this was made in.
Yeah.
Like it looks good.
Yeah, there's one in, I think it's Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, that's really good. Where this one they do it, you don't see him turn into Larry. I think it's an interesting.
You don't see him turn into Larry.
Yeah, it's an interesting holdover from. I feel like it's a holdover from the original version of the script that you only see him turn into Larry at the end.
Yeah.
So after he's been killed.
You can use, because there is a big chunk of this movie where you do kind of wonder how much of this is in his head.
Right. And it could go either way, for a lot of it.
Yeah,
depending on what the point of view.
I think by the end they've kind of clinched the fact that no, he was transforming into a monster.
When you watch his father watch him transform back into a person,
then they're like, we are going for it.
Yeah.
With that. But I like that there is that period of plausible deniability where even Larry himself is kind of like, wait, is this really happening to me, or am I going crazy? Because the prevailing theory amongst like his father and the doctor and the cop are like, nah, you're going crazy. Like, you're not actually turning into a wolf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I always like that more so, I think, than Dracula and Frankenstein. Wolfman is more of a feral monster. Dracula in these movies moves very slowly and very deliberately, and you don't really see what he's doing.
Right, and he has a plan usually.
Yeah.
He has like a goal he's trying to accomplish.
Right. Frankenstein is more... He's explosive, but he's just kind of wants people to leave him alone.
Yeah, more or less.
And Wolfman is actively attacking people, and Frankenstein doesn't really actively attack people unless someone attacks him first. But Wolfman is out there going after people, and again, it's weird. I think this must be just a times thing where he is a wolf. But for some reason, he kills people by choking them to death.
Yes, yeah. I'm going to strangle you in the way a wolf would typically.
It is very
kill
funny.
Its prey. Yes.
And I actually I forgot to mention one of the things that really sets this movie up to feel like a fairy tale is the opening when they do the cast thing.
Yes.
That's a very theatrical. Here are all the players. The way that they usually do it at the end credits, where they'll show the person and the name and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I liked that. That's like very charming.
Yeah.
That kind of old-timey opening.
The makeup was done by Jack Pierce, who is basically the Jack Kirby of the Universal Monsters. He, I don't think he worked on Dracula, but he basically worked on everything else. He designed the Frankenstein makeup, Wolfman, the Mummy. He was the guy.
Yeah.
Up until his one downfall was that he was not much for changing with the times, and his method of creating makeup was very time. What's the word I'm looking for?
Intensive.
Time intensive.
Yeah.
Because he would build everything up, like from nothing.
Yeah.
Whereas, and he was still doing that even when they started doing like foam latex.
Right, prosthetics kind of, that you could just have a piece that goes on over somebody's face or forehead or whatever.
And I think a couple of the later versions of Wolfman, you can see the difference, and I honestly don't think it looks as good. But he was the king of monster makeup.
Yeah.
Up until he kind of his sell-by date was up, and then they basically shit-canned him.
Aww.
That's the thing that sucks about all this stuff. It's like it doesn't take a lot to be nice and recognize someone's achievements, you know?
But
like,
I mean,
even if you're,
I think Hollywood and movie making was a very different industry for a long time.
I don't think that it's gotten that much better, but it's gotten better.
No, but I think there's maybe a few more avenues now for people to build up relationships and you know, if one studio cans you, there's another one right over there that's that could take you on and use your talents.
To be fair though, it's like
it's more competition.
You know, if he's not working up to the standards that everybody else is working, it's going to be tough. And I mean, that's his own character flaw, I guess. But you still they don't have to be jerks.
But I do think that there was more of an overt ruthlessness back then. Yeah. And that was more accepted.
Yeah. Did you see the movie Babylon?
No.
No, it's about it came out last year or the year before. Mm-hmm. Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie.
I remember it coming out. I think
it's about the change from the silent era to the sound era, and kind of how the hedonistic days of the silent movie era 20s kind of was forced into straightening up as things this studios changed and stuff. I thought it was great. It's probably about 45 minutes too long, but it's there's some really great stuff in there. But it
sounds like one of those movies for people who love movies.
Yes. I think it's great just as a spectacle, but yes, it is very much a.
I'm not. I haven't seen it. I can't cast any aspersions. I'm not meaning to, but it sounds like it would be especially appealing to someone who has
definitely
a little more than a passing knowledge about what those times were like.
But it deals with the same kind of stuff where it's like once they get into movies with sound, the actors who were mainstays of the silent era start to fall off. Some of them just because their voices are weird.
I was going to say it's just a different skill set.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a totally different, completely different way of acting.
I actually think Lon Chaney Sr., that was an issue. Yeah. That he had like a weird voice.
I could see that.
Unfortunately, I don't know if he did any sound movies. I'm not sure.
No idea.
Yeah, what just to kind of round it out.
Sure.
How do you feel about Lon Chaney Jr. in this? I feel like he's in a really tough position.
Yeah.
Because his father is like the king of horror movies.
Well, and it's such a weird character.
Yeah.
Like you have to play it. And a lot of people talk about how they're like, well, he brings such a vulnerability to the character that it's naturally endearing because you're watching him and he seems genuinely distressed. And I get that, but I also feel like he doesn't quite have enough charm to justify some of his behavior at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
And I keep just coming back to the fact that like him and Claude Rains being father and son.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's just so jarring. Even though as I looked up, they are 17 years apart. Claude Rains was 17 years older than him, so it could have worked.
Yeah, but
there's just something about it where it's just kind of like funny. It's almost like comedic to watch him call Claude Rains' dad.
He's so much bigger than him. That's part of it, I think.
Well, and the British thing.
Yeah.
And
it's
like
strange.
Claude Rains doesn't seem old enough.
To their credit, they actually go a bit weirder in the remake.
Oh.
Where John and Larry Talbot are respectively Anthony Hopkins and Benicio del Toro.
Wow.
Which might be even harder to track.
Okay.
I do think they
swinging for the fences.
I do think in that movie there's a whole thing about his mother being like Spanish or something. I forget, but
there are no mothers in this movie.
No, there are no mothers.
Yeah, Gwen doesn't have a mother. Larry doesn't have a
incorrect.
Mother. Where's her mother?
Maria Uspenskaya is Bella's mother.
Oh! I thought you were saying incorrect.
Sorry.
Gwen's mother is around, and I was like, what? I don't know about that. But no, yeah, I think it's a weird role. Like it's a weird role, so it's tough because if you asked me what I would have had him do differently, I can't tell you.
Yeah. He seems like he's trying to play it like Bing Crosby or something.
Yeah, maybe.
Hello there.
Yeah, maybe that's what kind of
those beautiful earrings
puts me off a little bit.
Those pretty ears of yours.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't hate it.
I was just watching you from the tree. Don't mind what I was doing.
I hate this impression. It's freaking me out. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about Lon Chaney Jr.?
I think he actually gets better in the later movies because he's basically playing. I think he's at his best in this movie when he plays the pathos of it.
Yes.
When he's the frustration.
Yes.
And
when he's the tortured soul.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that's what he really shines at.
Yeah.
I think the parts where he's, trying to be charming towards Gwen or trying to talk about apertures or whatever in telescopes, I'm just like, I don't buy this.
An aperture is just like a gaping hole.
No.
I
think we've talked longer than this movie.
Yes. I think so. Lon Chaney Jr. and Evelyn Ankers absolutely hated each other. She played Gwen. Yes. So that's just fun to throw in there. Also, Lon Chaney Jr. and Jack Pierce hated each other. So I don't know if Lon Chaney wanted to be in this movie, but
I was gonna say if the common denominator is always you, maybe you're the problem, Lon Chaney Jr.
Also, I know Jack Pierce was notoriously kind of a crank. Like he was a cranky guy. But,
still.
The last thing I wanted to talk about briefly is the music. This has I think Wolfman probably has one of the more recognizable scores just because the way that time works.
Yeah.
Dracula didn't have any music.
Right.
Well, it had Swan Lake.
Yes.
At the beginning, but that's it.
Yeah.
Frankenstein didn't have any. Bride of Frankenstein has a pretty memorable score. But of the big ones, Wolfman is the only one who really has this theme.
Yeah.
And they picked a good theme because it's a tritone theme, which is known as the Devil's Triad.
Oh, nice.
Which is called as such because in the medieval times, these notes, or this, not these exact notes, but this collection of notes played in this way, was thought to be satanic.
Nice.
And so it was banned. And so it was the original.
Awesome.
It's very the predecessor of heavy metal, sort of, which is works out pretty well because if you know the song Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath, they use that in the very first song of the album. That bum bum bum.
Oh shit! Yeah.
And in this, it's bum bum bum. I also think that Danny Elfman took some Batman from this. Because there is there's a couple specific places where there's a cascading bit of music that sounds exactly like part of his Batman theme.
Cool.
Where it kind of goes bum 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 bum, and it doesn't have that last bum bum note on there. And I listened to it back just to make sure I wasn't crazy. And if I can find it, I'll throw it in here. But
nice.
It's the music was by Charles Previn, I think. It says he was the musical director, so I'm going to say he probably wrote it. But what's his name? Lon Chaney Jr. played Lawrence Talbot 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 times.
Wow.
I think 5 times. And then Wolfman, it just kind of sat on, no one did anything with him until, well, obviously, famously, everybody found out he has nards in the late 80s. And then they finally remade it in, I think it was 2010 with Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins, a movie I was very excited for because originally it was going to be done by this guy named Mark Romanek, who was a indie guy who was on his way up and had done, I think he's the guy who did this movie called 1 Hour Photo.
Oh,
with Robin Williams.
Yeah, that
very
movie's
creepy
great.
kind of movie. So he was going to do this, and the big selling point was that Rick Baker was doing all the special effects, and it was going to be all practical.
Oh, wow.
And he designed this amazing makeup for Benicio del Toro. And then somewhere in there, because movies are movies, Mark Romanek left and got replaced by Joe Johnston, who is the director of such famous horror movies as The Rocketeer.
Oh, God.
And Captain America, the First Avenger.
Okay.
And all of
not a great fit.
No. All of the transformations were done in CGI. And it looks like dog shit.
Of course, because also that was like a time where CGI was still pretty dodgy.
And I think Rick Baker might have left.
I would have if I were him and they were like, yeah, we're going to do all the transformations in CGI. I would have been like, well, it's been real. Good luck.
And I think it might have been one of those situations like the prequel to The Thing where they actually did everything practically
and then they overlaid it with stuff.
The other way, it's probably this way, which is they told him he was going to have this kind of budget, and then they kept cutting the budget. But anyway, the Rick Baker led Wolfman remake was not to be what I wanted it to be. However, I will say it's not a good movie. The end of it is worth watching because they really key in on the father-son stuff.
Oh.
And the end of the movie is like a perfect Hammer movie ending where Talbot Castle catches on fire.
Oh, good.
And Sir John Talbot also turns into a werewolf. And there is a werewolf fight inside a burning castle.
What?
It's pretty fucking cool.
What? Okay.
And it ends with Benicio del Toro Wolfman punching off his father's head.
Okay. All right.
So,
I need to whenever this is streaming for free on a service.
Yes.
I need to fast forward to that ending.
Yeah. I kind of had wanted to go back and watch it again, but I know it's not going to be better than it was. But anyway, I think that's going to do it.
Yeah.
For the Wolfman. I'm sorry if I blabbed too much, but
it's okay. I forgive
I've
you.
got 35 years of Universal monsters boiling inside me.
You had to let it out at some point.
This is number 86 on our list. How do you feel about the placement? Higher, lower? Take it off the list.
This is a tough one. I feel like this one should be closer to 1. Like I feel like
higher up on higher as in lower.
Yeah. Lower number, higher rank.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Just because it's the Wolfman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's such an iconic. If you're going for horror and monster movies, this is one of the big ones. And I'm not saying it should be top 10.
Yeah.
I don't think it quite does that, but yeah, if you put this in the top 40 somewhere.
That's the tough thing with this list, right? Because the top top 10 are basically movies that came out last year and movies from like 1920.
Right. And it's kind of
I'm exaggerating, but not by much.
No, because isn't like the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari?
Yeah, it's
somewhere in the top 10.
The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Nosferatu, Us.
Yeah.
Let Me Out, or is that what that movie's called?
I don't know.
Not Let Me Out. You know what I'm talking about.
Which one
the other Peterson. The hell is that movie called? Get Out. Let Me Out is the vampire version.
Let's let the right one in.
Yes. Get Out.
Let Me Out.
It's the same idea.
More or less.
And then it's just like Psycho, I think, is at the top. But but if I would say, as much as I love me a silent movie, I kind of feel like the Universal monster movies have more importance.
Yeah, for setting up kind of the modern horror movies.
Nosferatu's a tough one to bounce because that's kind of undeniable. But like Caligari, it's like, we can knock that down some places.
If you've seen a ton of horror movies but you've never seen Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, I don't think you're unmoored in the genre. You know what I mean?
Have you seen that Portlandia skit? It's
I need more context then.
It's Fred Armisen is someone who has Netflix, old style Netflix, where they get DVDs, and the one DVD that he's had on his table for like 6 weeks, and he keeps trying to get around to watching it, is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And as someone who was big into the original version of Netflix, I identified with that really hard, because there's always that one movie where it's like, this is a movie I should see.
Yes.
I'm going to get it. I'm going to watch it. And then it just sits on your coffee table
you
for
start
like 2
watching
months.
it and you're like, maybe I'm not in the mood for this right now.
Exactly. Yeah. And it becomes like this cursed object in his house that he can't, until he has to finally give it to somebody else.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say this is probably deserves to be in the top 50.
Yeah.
If for reputation alone, even though I do think it is a really good movie, but
I think it is a really good movie, but I think it's more about the legacy of it. That kind of means that I'm a little surprised it's all the way out in the 80s. Yeah.
That's going to do it for Wolfman. We have a wild card coming up. Amanda, it's your pick. What are we going to be doing?
Well, Clay, I hope you didn't get too much fog in this movie, because I want to do John Carpenter's The Fog.
You say that now, but then when we watch it, and I hate it, and I open the show by saying, get the fog out of here, you're really going to regret that for a number of reasons. No, I really like The Fog.
Feels like the right time of year to do it. I don't know if that's true, but it's starting to get cooler out, and people are wearing cozy sweaters around here, and it was very foggy a couple days ago, and
I find it very funny that the ongoing late year holiday season war between spooky season people and Christmas season people is so there are so many similarities where the holiday season people enjoy the coziness of sweaters, and the spooky season people also enjoy the coziness of sweaters. Somehow that works with the horror stuff as well as it works with the Christmas stuff.
Very different looking sweaters, though.
Well, not necessarily. The podcast that I really like, with Gorley and Rust, their whole thing is they call themselves the Cozy Horror Podcast.
Nice.
And so they talk about the movies, and they actually have every year they do a cozy bracket where they do all the movies they've covered for the year in a tournament to see which one is the coziest.
Oh.
So I was really excited when they got to Black Christmas, because I was like, they are going to cozy in their pants when they watch Black Christmas. All right, I need to get out of here. Thank you guys for listening. If you'd like to help support the show, head over to patreon.com/the Penske File.
He really does need to get out of here.
Yeah, where you can where you can follow along with us as we go through the video nasties this year. We've got a couple left. In September, we did Inferno, Dario Argento's Inferno. We have done Tobe Hooper's The Funhouse. We've done Dario Argento's Tenebrae. October, we're getting really, really in there. We're going to do Last House on the Left.
Yeah, if the last couple episodes haven't been dark enough for you.
Yeah.
Come join us.
The polar opposite of Universal Monster coziness is The Last House on the Left. Just a sweaty, gross swamp movie. But yeah, we'd be much obliged if you did that. And thank you guys for listening. Thank you for joining me, Amanda.
Thank you, Clay.
We will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Whoa, it must have been while you were kissing me. You took